Hey everyone! Today we're talking about a time in history when Europe changed forever. The rise of feudalism and how the Vikings, also known as the Northmen, played a huge part in it. One big reason feudalism became so important was because the Northmen started showing up in southern Europe. These were tough, adventurous people who lived around the Baltic Sea in places we now call Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. For as long as anyone can remember, they had been living there, farming just enough to survive, raising animals, and fishing in the cold waters. Unlike other tribes that moved around during the 5th and 6th centuries, the Northmen stayed put. They kept worshipping their old gods and living simple lives. Hardly any news about the Roman Empire made it to them, so they didn't know much about what was going on far away. But everything started to change when Charlemagne came along. When he conquered the Saxons, Christianity and the rule of the Franks got very close to the Northmen's lands. Soon, traders and missionaries began visiting, telling stories about the rich, beautiful lands to the south. The Northmen's imaginations ran wild. They started dreaming about adventure, wealth, and easy victories. Unlike earlier invaders who traveled on land, the Northmen traveled by sea. Their homeland was rocky and full of narrow valleys, which made farming difficult. But the sea? That was their opportunity. They built sleek, fast ships with rows of oars that could handle rough waves and sneak past enemies. These ships allowed them to explore and raid faraway places. They called themselves Vikings, which means men from the Vikes, or the creeks and inlets of Scandinavia. Even during Charlemagne's time, the Vikings started making their presence known. There's a story about how, while Charlemagne was staying in a city in southern Gaul, a few Viking ships came to raid the harbor. At first, people thought they were traders from Brittany or Jewish merchants, but Charlemagne recognized them right away. "These are not merchants," he said. "These are cruel enemies." When the ships were chased, they disappeared as quickly as they had come. Charlemagne watched them vanish and felt a deep sadness. He turned to his friends and said, "Do you know why I'm so upset? It's not because I fear these men. It's because they've come so close during my lifetime, and I worry about the terrible things they will do to those who come after me." And he was right. By the time Charlemagne died, Viking raids had become a major problem. At first, they came in small groups, but soon dozens or even hundreds of ships would show up. No part of Europe was safe. The Vikings raided the coasts of Germany, France, England, Scotland, Ireland, Spain, and Italy. Their lightweight ships allowed them to sail up rivers, far into the middle of these countries. Once there, they'd steal horses and ride through the countryside, looting and destroying everything in their way. The Vikings especially liked attacking churches and monasteries. Why? Because they were full of treasure, gold, silver, and fine embroidered cloths. And since the monks and priests weren't fighters, these places were easy targets. The Vikings didn't believe in the Christian God, so they had no problem destroying holy places. Anyone who tried to stop them was struck down without mercy. One of the most infamous Vikings was a man named Hastings. Some say he wasn't even a Viking but a French peasant who joined them. Either way, he became one of their most feared leaders. For nearly 50 years, Hastings terrorized towns and countryside across France, England, Spain, and beyond. On one journey, he sailed around Spain into the Mediterranean, raiding southern France, Africa, and Italy. His biggest goal was to attack Rome, just like Alaric and the Vandals had done. But Hastings made a big mistake. He confused a small Italian city called Luna for Rome. Luna's walls were too strong to attack head-on, so Hastings came up with a sneaky plan. He sent a message to the city's leaders saying he was dying and wanted to become a Christian. The bishop and rulers, happy to see a Viking convert, agreed to baptize him. Later, Hastings' men sent word that their leader had died and asked if they could bury him in the city's church. The people of Luna thought there was no harm in this and allowed it. But Hastings had been faking. Once inside the city walls, he and his men grabbed their weapons and attacked. Meanwhile, more Vikings slipped in through the gates. Hastings and his crew quickly took over the city by tricking everyone. At first, the Vikings only raided during the summer and returned home before winter storms hit. But soon they started staying year-round. They would capture islands or take control of river mouths, using these as bases to launch their raids. From these spots they could strike at any time. The terror they caused was so great that churches began praying, "From the fury of the Northmen, good Lord, deliver us." The fight against the Vikings went on for years. Within 50 years of Charlemagne's death, Paris had been attacked 3 times. At first, the French kings tried to pay the Vikings to leave, but this only made them greedier. The Vikings kept coming back for more. Eventually, local nobles and towns had to take matters into their own hands. They built stronger castles and fortified bridges to stop Viking ships from traveling farther inland. And the most famous battle happened in Paris in the year 886. At that time, Paris wasn't the big important capital we know today, but its location made it a valuable place. The city was on a small island in the Seine River, with a strong bridge connecting it to the land. When the Vikings came sailing up the river, the people of Paris were ready to fight. Count Odo, the city's governor, and the bishop encouraged everyone to stand strong. The Viking army was huge, 700 ships carrying about 40,000 men, but the city's defenders held on for an incredible 11 months. Even though the King of France at the time didn't provide much help, the people of Paris, led by Count Odo, refused to give up. In the end, the Vikings had no choice but to leave. This brave defense made Count Odo a hero. His family already had a history of fighting the Vikings. His father, Robert the Strong, had won many battles against them, but was eventually killed in a fight with a famous Viking leader named Hastings. After the siege, Odo became so popular that people thought he would make a better king than the weak ruler they had. Not long after, the king was removed, and Odo was crowned as the new king. However, Odo's reign didn't last forever. After his death, the old royal family, the Carolingians, took back the throne, but their power was weaker than before. For the next 100 years, Odo's descendants were their biggest rivals. Then, in 987, one of Odo's relatives, Hugh Capet, became king. This time the change was permanent. From then on, all French kings for over 800 years came from Hugh Capet's family. Their rule only ended in 1792, when France became a republic. But the Viking story in France didn't end there. About 25 years after the siege of Paris, a group of Vikings settled in France so firmly that they couldn't be removed. Their leader was Rollo, a giant of a man known for his incredible strength and courage. He was called Rollo the Walker, because he was so big that no horse could carry him. Rollo wasn't just a raider, he wanted to lead and build. When he captured towns, he strengthened their defenses, repaired their churches, and ruled as a leader rather than just a pirate. In 911, Rollo made a deal with the King of France. He was given a large area of land around the Seine River, which later became known as Normandy. In exchange, Rollo had to settle his Viking followers there and stop attacking other parts of France. He also had to convert to Christianity and swear loyalty to the French king. Rollo didn't like the idea of showing submission to the king. When asked to kneel and kiss the king's foot, he refused and told one of his men to do it. The soldier awkwardly lifted the king's foot to his lips and accidentally knocked the king over. Under Rollo's rule, the Vikings in Normandy adapted quickly. They became farmers, landlords, and Christians. They even started speaking French and following French customs. Within a few generations, they were no different from the other people of France, except for their energy, leadership skills, and love for adventure. Rollo's descendants didn't stop there. In the 11th century, they began to make their mark across Europe. One group of Normans traveled to southern Italy and Sicily, where they created a new kingdom called the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Others ventured to far-off lands. They settled in Iceland, Greenland, and even reached North America long before Columbus. The Normans also played a big role in the Crusades, leading efforts to take back Jerusalem. In Constantinople, some became part of the Varangian Guard, an elite group of bodyguards for the Byzantine emperor. In the north, They helped build settlements in Russia, and started a dynasty that contributed to the rise of the Russian Empire. The Vikings, once known as sea raiders, transformed into builders, rulers, and explorers.